I'm Dr. Julie Galvin,
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Snyder.
and we are here presenting our fifth session of the book Untangled by Dr. Lisa Damour. We started with an introduction in our first week, and we worked our way through the first three chapters. And today we're going to talk about our fourth chapter called Contending with Adult Authority.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Dr. Snyder, do you want to talk a little bit about what this chapter is about?
Yeah, so this is a pretty interesting chapter, and probably part of the reason a lot of our clients come to us, right, is it's the arguing, the contending with adult authority, right? The tone and the attitude, breaking the rules, right? Those kinds of things that get parents worried at times. And that's really what this chapter talks about, is how this is a really natural, normal, healthy part of teen development to start to contend with adult authority, to start to question the rules, to start to, push for their own individual choices and autonomy, and how normal and healthy that can be, and how parents can kind of support that part of development, how you can react to those situations and set them up on a path, a healthy emotional intelligence, down the road.
I think she uses the analogy of Dorothy seeing behind the curtain with the Wizard of Oz, and how that's such a great analogy for what we're contending with in this chapter, is that they see that we are not without faults. They kind of see that behind the curtain. They can even see sometimes adults do certain things for certain reasons, which may at some level seem dishonest or kind of like planning their reaction accordingly. And I think at first it's hard for kids to see that we aren't perfect. And she uses that kind of seeing behind the curtain as an analogy throughout this chapter.
Mm-hmm. I think it's even harder for the adults sometimes, for their kids to know that they're not perfect, right? Like to give up that sense of, I know all, I know what's best for you, and I think it's really hard on the adults too, that pulling behind the curtain.
It is. She does a great job of talking about how they have, always looked up to us, maybe seen us as being, somewhat close to perfect. And then all of a sudden, our sweet daughters are challenging us and, maybe defying us and disrespecting us. And Dr. Damour does a great job of telling us, like, this is okay and it's normal, and we want them to go through this. It is part of that transition to successfully being an adult, where you're going to have authority figures in your lives, and they're first challenging us as their parents because we're closest to them. But in the adult world, we're going to have other people. We're going to have bosses. We're going to have people in the community, maybe in college or whatever, that we see are maybe erring in some way. And how do we respectfully contend with those authority figures? And by guiding our daughters through this stage, we can help them successfully learn how to navigate this.
Absolutely, because we want the daughters of our world to know, right, when they should stand up for themselves, when an adult authority figure maybe crosses a line, and when they do need to, seek help or support. And we also want them to know, sometimes you just get someone that's not a great teacher or not a great boss, and you just kind of have to keep your head down and do the work and get through it and move on right to the next stage. And so, teaching them all those kinds of things too, how do I handle these different situations? When do I pick this tactic versus when do I pick that tactic? And so much of that comes from their arguing with their parents, right? Parents are this safe environment for them to kind of try out different arguing techniques. They feel safe. They know at the end of the argument, you're going to still love them. They're going to still love you. It's kind of a low risk situation, right? There's always the risk of maybe some punishing or, grounding, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's kind of low risk versus, if they argue with a teacher or something, they could get a really bad grade and they could get really anxious about those kinds of things. So it's a safe environment for them to kind of practice these techniques. And it's a great opportunity for parents to show them healthy ways to contend with authority figures, how to communicate. And she talks about this a lot in the book, right? Like, communicating through, your tone and your words, your body language. And then if something doesn't go right during the argument, which often, right, heated arguments can turn a little more heated than we thought they would, going to your daughter afterwards and saying, hey, that was quite an argument. Let's figure it out. And it's that resolving of the argument. That's the heart of developing, right, her skills in this area, being reflective on your own end and helping her start to be reflective on her end. And even if she doesn't show, those understandings right away, right? She might not sit there and be like, oh, wow, I'm being so reflective about my arguing now. She might just sit there and roll her eyes. Again, planting the seeds, right? Doing this kind of thing over and over will show her by example, even if she doesn't immediately display those skills on her own.
I think it does by listening to what she's presenting. And Dr. D'Amour gives us some very clear strategies. First of all, take her seriously. Offer agreement, offer a compromise, or if she's making a good point and you agree with her, go ahead and admit that you've done something wrong, you've made a mistake, and you can move on. And I think it's just that, the work that goes on behind the curtains that maybe they haven't seen us doing as parents, navigating different situations with them and how we kind of rationalize what's going to work for her in the situation, what's not. And it's inviting her to partake in that discussion and that thinking. And as a result of that, she's going to be better off down the road making those decisions. And Dr. D'Amour takes us into that concept of emotional intelligence, and it's understanding your own emotions, but also being able to take the perspective of somebody else and then navigating that situation. And by doing this with them, we're growing their emotional intelligence for now and for the future.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think you're right in that doing that, taking behind the curtain, inviting them into this conversation, right, can be scary for parents, especially if they feel like they're giving up their status as the parent or the authority figure. But I think you kind of, you were heading in that direction when you were talking about they're moving from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, which is kind of what we've been talking about through this whole series, and being able to understand the parents' rationale for these decisions, why, you have a curfew, or why, we want you to turn your music down in the house, or different things like that. When they better understand your decision-making process, they're going to use that when they start to have to make decisions completely on their own when they're out of the house. You want them to kind of see and be transparent about that so they internalize it and can then do that on their own, rather than, hitting 18, going off to college or going off to an apartment, and then not really understanding why you had any of the rules in place, and then maybe learning by error then, which is a little bit more scary because they're kind of completely on their own at that point.
Yeah, it is. It's not just that rules are arbitrary. They're there for a reason. And so by leading them to that process of risk assessment, given certain situations, we know for a fact we're not there most of the time, unfortunately, when they're encountering difficult decisions. And so by teaching them these skills, they're going to be able to better assess risk and make decisions on their own when we're not there.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other things that she talks about in the chapter that I really love is the idea of rules versus preferences with parenting, right? And as parents, we might have a tendency to make rules about things that are actually preferences. And in the book, she gives the example of her daughter writing on the back of her hand with a pen. Her gut reaction was, don't write on your hand, use some paper. And then, she was reflective about it and thought, okay, that's just a preference, right? It's not a big deal. Go ahead, write on your hand, I can handle that. So some choices, right, from maybe some outfit choices, makeup choices, music preferences, little things like writing on your hand, checking yourself as a parent and thinking, okay, is this a rule? Is there a good reason for this, to keep them safe or to, protect them, give them an advantage, in a job situation or things like that? Like, does this rule make sense? Or is it maybe just a personal preference and it's actually okay if they do it a different way?
I agree. I think there's lots of great tools in this chapter, and it really helps us to understand why suddenly they're challenging us and how we can really use this stage in a super positive way to help them navigate respectfully but appropriately challenging adult authority in their lives. So I know we both really enjoyed this chapter. We hope you did as well. And we invite you to see our notes on our website about this chapter. And in preparation for next week, we're going to be reading chapter 5, which is called Planning for the Future. So we hope you enjoy that chapter. We'll be reading it in the meantime, and then we'll join you in the next session to talk about chapter 5.
All right, see you then.